This is the KGAB Wyoming Wake Up with Glenn Woods on AM 650 KGAB, where Cheyenne comes to talk.
8:08's the time, and it's 20 degrees. It's AM 650 KGAB Radio. My name is Glenn Woods. Sitting in the studio with me is another candidate for governor who's braved the weather to come all the way into our studios this morning. Mary Throne is in with us. Are you still a Campbell County resident?
No, I'm a Laramie County resident.
You're a Laramie County resident now. Okay. Because I remember you from a while back, and I do remember you were originally from there. Originally from Gillette or just Campbell County?
Originally from Campbell County.
Okay. So would that be the ranching life for you as a young lady?
Yes. I grew up on and we still own the ranch. Grew up on a ranch on Wild Horse Creek on the Achita Road west of Gillette. Yeah,
okay. Now I do know where that is, especially when you said Achita Road, because I've taken it, which is a beautiful, stunning drive out that way.
Yes.
Okay. So what brought you down to Laramie County?
Well, I actually left after high school to go to college, law school, see the world. Worked in Denver, and so when I came back to Wyoming, my first job was in Cheyenne, and I thought I would get back to northern Wyoming, but then I met my husband, had kids, etc.
Okay. Yeah, it's those kids that always do that to you. Bring
Yes.
you on down. All right, so now for those people who don't know your resume, let's take a look at your resume since then and what leads you up to eventually deciding to run for governor.
Well, I spent 10 years in the legislature. I'm also a natural resources attorney. I've represented a variety of energy companies, large and small mineral companies. But I spent 10 years in the legislature and 6 years in leadership. Really enjoyed the legislature. And the last few years in the legislature, I saw us making the wrong decisions that we should be making to get us out of the boom and bust cycle.
Okay. Now, we'll talk about that in just a moment. Running on the Democrat ticket?
Yes.
Okay, right, which is, we can't say that that's not possible in Wyoming because we had Governor Friedenthal.
We had Governor Friedenthal, Governor Sullivan, Governor Hirschler.
And what's interesting this time around in this particular race so far, we have two ladies running now, which, of course, to me, that just, again, that's Wyoming all over again. So, all right, let's drill into what specifically are bad decisions that you see the state of Wyoming making as far as you were talking about economic diversity.
Right. So starting in about 2015, when the price of oil plummeted, and then shortly after that legislative session, the mines declared, two of the largest mining companies declared bankruptcy, laid off 500 people. We were still just doing things the same old way, not really recognizing where we are as a state. And I think our biggest problem as a state has also been our biggest blessing, which of course is we have this enormous mineral wealth, coal, oil, and natural gas that have sustained us forever. But they are all facing economic challenges. And so the time to deal with that transition is early in the downturn. We didn't expand Medicaid. We spent money. People always accuse me of wanting to spend all our savings. If you go back and review the record, that is not what I said. I said, what are we doing with this money? And in 2015 and 2016, I actually voted against the budget because I thought it spent money badly.
Okay. Well, now, let's stick with diversification for a moment.
Sure.
I'm more of a libertarian perspective.
Right.
Is it the role of government to try to diversify the economy? And if so, how?
I think government has a role to play in that, supporting our communities. But what government has to do is, one, provide the kind of services that businesses need to survive.
Okay.
Like roads, good roads, water, sewer, fire, police, strong communities. If government's not doing its job, also I would put education in that category. If government is not doing its job, businesses are not going to want to come here because they won't have what they need to make money.
Would you then be in favor of Governor Mead's Endow program?
I do like the Endow program, but I think it's too long term. I think there are decisions that need to be made now. And Endow doesn't relieve the elected officials of doing their job today.
Okay. Now, does that include, for example, the governor would like to see an airline And that was one of the things that was discussed in the legislative session. And they're looking for a way to subsidize an airline in the state of Wyoming. Is that something that you see as a good way to spend resources?
I think in Wyoming, because we are the least populous state, and we don't have enough of a market to generate support for an airline. So when it's something like that the private sector has not been providing to Wyoming, I mean, look at Cheyenne. We don't even have an airline coming into our capital city right now. I think, there is a government role to play to kind of prop it up.
Okay. With this past budget session, I personally looked at it and I thought, well, they did make a lot of cuts, but still, boy, there's a lot more to go. So and there was discussion about raising taxes to increase some revenue coming in, or maybe do we make more cuts? If you were governor at the time, now what direction would you have taken?
So next year, when I hope to be governor, what I would want to do is just reframe the whole discussion. Okay. Our budget is still built on having enormous mineral wealth. Money flows all sorts of different places automatically, and the legislature actually deals with a fairly small portion of it when they do the budget. So what I'd want to do is just blow it up, change the discussion, and start with the very basic question of what do we want government to do? And I would include in that discussion the needs of our cities, towns, and counties. They too often are treated like second-class citizens by the legislature, and they provide most of the services. So I would want to have a comprehensive discussion. What do we need government to do? And then the next question is, what do we have to pay for it?
Right.
And then you look at gaps, if there are any.
Okay. And one of the things we'll have to get into, and I'll give you just a moment to sip your coffee there and think about it, we have to talk about schools.
Yes.
Of course, that's a big issue. More with Mary Throne, who's running for governor, in just a moment. It's AM 650, KGAB Radio. 8:20 is the time, and 20 degrees. Okay, Mary, I keep doing this. I keep running across a convergence of numbers. So it's 8:20 and 20 degrees. I don't know
convenient.
Why. Yeah, I'm going to have to buy a lotto ticket based on all of this kind of stuff. Mary Throne is my guest. She's running for governor, the Democrat ticket here in the state of Wyoming. You just made a comment. You're right. A lot of Republicans are jumping into it. Are you the only Democrat right now?
I am the only Democrat right now.
Any others going to jump in there?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay. Well, that means your primary is going to be easy. It
yes.
should be.
Running against myself.
If you can't win that, then there's just no hope whatsoever.
That's true.
Right. One of the biggest issues in this past legislative session that we had, and it was a budget session, is, of course, schools and school funding. And, of course, we also got to take a look at where our students are as far as when they graduate and get out into the real world. Do they have what's necessary to make it in the real world? So let's talk funding first off. I always thought we were too top-heavy in Wyoming, but what's your thought as far as administrators?
Well, the legislature did a study, and I think it found that we weren't top-heavy in terms of administrators. But even if there are cuts to be made in administration, that doesn't solve the problem. We have a great education system. We've worked hard, not that it can't always be improved upon.
Sure.
But we're ranked 7th in the country, according to Ed Week, which is a professional publication that does that sort of thing. And, we were discussing economic development earlier. Economic development experts will tell you that a strong education system is one of the first things people look at when considering a move to a state. And certainly if we want to attract young families, we need to keep an education system strong. I thought the discussion in the legislature got a little wild this year. I thought the Senate was taking exactly the wrong approach, which is to gut what's been working in Wyoming. I was particularly appalled by the constitutional amendment. Our founders in Wyoming put education in the Constitution for a reason, and I don't think we should be taking it out now. I also like to tell the story that my grandparents on my mother's side came to Campbell County in 1917 because they heard the schools were better.
Okay. Well, now, if we pay, now you've heard this argument before, we spend more per student in Wyoming than most states do. And yet there's other states out there that spend less but are getting better results.
Right, and that is a false argument.
Okay.
Because it's not an apples to apples comparison.
Okay.
So if you look at, by and large, we do spend a lot. But if you look at like size of district versus size of district, we're pretty comparable. It's going to cost more in our smaller districts to educate kids because we don't have the economies of scale. And even our large cities are not large by other state standards. I'd also say that the East Coast states that are ahead of us in that national ranking spend a lot more per capita than we do. And I would also add that a lot of the senators cherry-picked the test data. I'd encourage everybody to look at our NAEP scores, which is a national test, a national indicator, and we're in the top 10 in those.
So as governor, what would you do as far as our education? I'm going to go ahead and call it a budget crisis. What would you do to fix it?
So again, I think the important thing as governor is to make sure people have the facts and make sure that people aren't being misled by the debate. If I never have to hear we're not getting our bang for our buck again, it'll be too soon. Right. It's just a silly argument. So I was on the education committee for 4 years, I think, school facilities for a few years, accountability for its entire existence. So we've worked really hard to create a system that identifies the strong schools and helps provide the supports to the weaker schools. And we just need to keep doing that. So the first thing I do as governor is try and tell people what's going on. And then we have to look again at the gap. We have to maximize our income from our trust funds, which actually I agree with Speaker Harshman, or I should say he agrees with me because I was talking about it before he did. But anyway, I'm digressing. But we need to look at all of our revenue streams. I think we've got a few years to solve that problem. I think it's also important to note that when we had a lot of money, we took some money out of the school foundation program to start the Hathaway Scholarship, for example. So we've used that school foundation money for other things, and I think the public needs to understand that too.
Mary Throne is my guest. She's running for governor for the state of Wyoming. If you have any questions, 632-6500 is the phone number. That's 632-6500. Let's, boy, there's so many things to take a look at, especially after, again, this
right.
past legislative session. Let's go ahead and take a look at something like the Stand Your Ground law that just passed for a moment there. Was that something that you would have, the governor didn't sign it, but he didn't veto it either. He just kind of let that through.
You know, when I look at that law and some of the other bills that were discussed this session, my frustration was that it was not dealing with pressing issues.
Right.
As far as I know, we have strong self-defense laws. They aren't in statute necessarily, but they're in a long line of court cases. So I didn't see the need for the Stand Your Ground law.
Okay. If you have any questions for Mary Throne, 632-6500 is the phone number. This is Glenn, who's on the phone with us.
My name is Hal Harkins.
Yes, sir.
I would like to know how she feels about the Common Core curriculum, and I would also like to know if I heard her say how we're going to pay for it. Are we going to raise taxes? That's the two main questions I'd like to know about.
Okay, thanks for calling.
So in Wyoming, we have a state board of education that adopts the standards, and our state board of education, through its regular process several years ago, adopt what is commonly referred to as the Common Core standards for language arts and math. But they went through a regular rulemaking process to do that, and those standards were stronger than what we had in place prior to them. I think there's some confusion out there that those came from the federal government, but they were actually adopted by our state board of education.
In the state of Wyoming, we have now left one insurance company, and some people sent to me as soon as the premiums just jumped up again, what their bills were, which was so much to cover. One family of four that was up in Sheridan sent me their bill, and it said it was like over $3,000 a month to cover the family. What are we going to do about this? How's Wyoming fix this?
Well, I don't think Wyoming can fix it alone. Again, being the least populated state in the country, our healthcare costs are always going to be higher. Obviously, the first step that I supported the entire time I was in the legislature, or as long as it was available, was Medicaid expansion. Medicaid expansion would have helped with that problem in terms of getting more people covered and stopping the cost shifting to those of us who have insurance. Would have saved the state money. So that's something I would still support. And then I think we would have to work with other governors and other governors of rural states to try and come up with solutions. I know those, if you're able to buy a subsidized policy on the exchange, it's great. But if you're buying, if you're not entitled to a subsidy, it's astronomical.
If you'd like
and not affordable for a lot.
No, clearly not. If you'd like to talk to Mary Throne, she's running for governor. 632-6500 is the phone number. This is Glenn. Who's on with us?
This is Diane. Mary, I just wondered if you were governor today and President Trump asked if we could send troops to the border. I know there's some governors from Montana and Oregon that said they wouldn't do that. Would you be willing to do that? And I'll hang up and you can answer. Thank you.
And I recognize Diane's voice, I'm pretty sure. Mm-hmm. Hi, Diane. That's a difficult question. I was thinking about that yesterday as I was listening to some of the news shows. And, this time of year is when things start flooding in Wyoming. I think I would follow the commander-in-chief in Wyoming. That's who we are as a state. But I would want to make sure that we're keeping enough people at home for the problems we know we have this time of year.
This is, it's going to be a little more difficult to answer, but Governor Freudenthal was not a Democrat in the sense of, let's say, your Massachusetts or California, like the governor of California kind of Democrat. He was more of a Wyoming Democrat, and he had said to me one time that if he had gone to someplace like New York or Massachusetts, he doesn't know that he could have stayed in the party there because he was, again, more of a Wyoming Democrat. Where would you put yourself in that category? More in his camp? I mean, you did even work for the mineral industries for a while as well. So you're about where on the needle, left and right?
I don't like to label myself. Mm-hmm. I like to just make common sense decisions and let other people interpret them. I don't really care if something's a conservative idea, a liberal idea, a middle of the road idea. I just want to know if it's going to work.
Okay.
And I do think of myself as a Wyoming Democrat. And to me, that means, again, because we're a rural state, our problems, our issues are different. We're very in tune with the land. We're very skeptical of the federal government. I don't think the federal government has all the answers for Wyoming. Certainly when it comes to energy and environmental regulation, I actually think we know better. A lot of programs that developed under Governor Freudenthal were then adopted by the EPA, for instance, to regulate oil and gas. So I think in a number of ways, that's what it means to be a Wyoming Democrat. We have a different view on guns. We're tied to the land. We like to recreate on our public lands, and we're very comfortable with digging things out of the ground and selling them.
And we got one more call. I'm going to squeeze this in real quick. Caller, you got to be fast on this one. Who's on the phone? What you got?
If she wouldn't have she doesn't think that we need to stand your ground, does that mean you're anti-gun and against the Second Amendment?
No, I didn't say what I said on Stand Your Ground is that we already had that in existing law. And so I didn't think the bill was necessary. Of course, I support the Second Amendment. I grew up with a gun behind the back door.
Okay. And as most people in Wyoming did. People can find you online. Your website, I thought, was a really simple name. Where do people find you?
At maryforwyoming.com. We're on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. And I still have the same cell number I had in the legislature.
Okay. So they can just call you and talk to you at any time. Making some appearances in town while you're in town?
Yes.
Okay. And they will be where?
Well, I guess hitting a few meetings. I'm going to the chamber today.
Okay.
Good healthcare discussion. Always more to learn there.
Always more to learn. Hey, thanks for coming in. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Glenn.
You're gonna
Appreciate
have to
it.
buy a new set of tires, you understand?
Yes,
Well,
most likely.
every candidate that I talk to ends up buying a new set of tires after they've been around the state enough.